Hey guys, I'm Charlie Ford, and if you can't tell, I'm a little overdressed today, to be fair, but I'm a veterinarian. I get a lot of questions about being a vet on my social media, and so I thought I would answer the most commonly asked questions that I've had over the last couple of weeks, so that you all stop asking me the same questions over and over again. Not that I don't mind, but let's put it all to rest. So I became a veterinarian 6.5 years ago, maybe just under that. I became a vet because I always wanted to be a veterinarian. When I was 3 years old, I would fish the bugs out of the pool and rescue them and put them on the side to recover. I had been a physical therapist first. I worked in intensive care and acute care with human hospitals. And then I decided that I was bored and I wanted to change. And the reason why I chose to be a vet rather than a human doctor, because I did sit the exams for that, was I wanted euthanasia as an option for my patients. I saw some pretty traumatic stuff in human hospitals and had some pretty traumatic conversations with people, and I just didn't want to be the person who saved someone's life only to put them in a situation that they couldn't escape. So I went off and became a vet. It took 5 years of training. People do ask me how long it takes. And when you learn how to be a vet, you do learn a lot about a lot of different animals. So you learn the basics like dog, cat, horse, cows, sheep, goats, pigs. And then you do chapters where you get to start to learn about exotic animals like birds and reptiles. Like, you do have to learn the anatomy of them, but there's a limit as to how much of the medicine you learn in that field because it's just so vast. Like, the amount of variety in the anatomy of different animals is so big that you can't realistically expect someone to know all of it. So we learn the basics, and then if you want to do that as a specialty, you go off and you learn that. But I learned quite a bit about birds, quite a bit about reptiles, and what else did I do? We had a random chapter on camels. That was kind of cool. Alpacas and llamas. I remember doing a placement on an alpaca. It was technically a mixed practice placement, but there was an alpaca and llama farm that we went and visited there, and we were there to worm them, and the jerk spat on us all day. But it was really fun. And then so I graduated and I decided to do emergency work. So I moved from Brisbane to Melbourne, and I worked in emergency for about 3 years before I started my company and I moved to America. So that's my genesis story. My favorite animal, I get asked a lot. My favorite animal is the penguin, and the reason why it is my favorite is because in my last year of being a student, you get to choose where you want to kind of focus, and I really wanted to experience exotic animals. So I did a lot of exotic placements. I went to South America, and I also had a 1-month placement at Adelaide Zoo, and there they have penguins. And so I had to help anesthetize them one day. And they're really cool because if you ever get the chance to touch a penguin, I guarantee you it is the softest thing you will ever touch in your life. I can't even describe to you, it's like touching air. Nothing compares to it, I would say. And then the other reason why I love them is because when you go to anesthetize them, they never stop swimming with their legs. So they had a penguin there and they really wanted to MRI him because he had a sore foot, but they couldn't work out how to do the MRI because you have to be still for an MRI. But when you put him under, he was still going to keep moving his legs, and so they were like, well, we can't MRI him, we can't get him to stay still. So sorry, it's sad for him, but really cute, a really cute fact to know. I would say that it's kind of rare to be a vet on call. The on-call world typically exists with large animals, like horses in particular, but also cattle and rural areas. It's not really a thing that I ever experienced in emergency. In emergency, because you need people there 24/7, you have, or even if it's a practice that's only open at night, you have a roster. So my typical hours were 6 p.m. till 6:30 a.m. in the morning. If I hadn't finished everything by 6:30, sometimes I would have to work a little bit later. When I first graduated, I worked in a clinic that was horrendously understaffed. And so I would often finish at like 10 a.m. So I was doing like 15 plus hours, 3 nights a week. And then I would sometimes get called in on top of that. So I was doing about 80 hours of night shift, and it was fucked. And I was depressed and I couldn't take it anymore. So after 4 months there, I moved to a specialty/emergency clinic that I fell in love with. Still love them to this day. I did 30 to 40, I think it's 36 to 40 hours a week there. And it was 3 nights of night shift, 6 p.m. till 6:30 a.m. And I learned an incredible amount there. And I'm very grateful that they taught me so much, because I have a knowledge base that a lot of people don't get the chance to have. My favorite thing to do as a vet, I get asked a lot. I loved ultrasound. If I could spend all day in a room doing ultrasound, I would have. Ultimately, I decided not to become an ultrasonographer, or they call it a radiologist, because I liked the hands-on experience of being with patients. I didn't want to be just looking at x-rays and MRIs and CTs and ultrasounds every day. But if I ever decided that I didn't want to be an emergency vet anymore, then I think that's probably what I would try to pursue, because I just find it fascinating that you can use sound waves to essentially see everything in your abdomen, and you can learn so much from an ultrasound, way more in a lot of instances than x-rays. So I have 2 jobs, and I often get asked how I balance both. So in America, I only work 1 job at the moment. I'm not a practicing vet in America. I can become a practicing vet, and I'm working on it. The reason why it's complicated is because I have to basically be on a different visa, or I have to be on a green card that allows me to practice here. So when I applied for a visa to come to America, I applied as a performer. So I can only be a performer under that visa. If I'm under a green card, I have more flexibility. I can do other jobs. So I'm working on getting my green card application, and then I also have to sit an exam, because America does not recognize the Australian education system when it comes to veterinary school. They don't recognize many countries, to be honest. And then even in America, it's very complicated. So if, for example, I sit the exam and I pass, and I decide to get registered in California, I can work in California, but there are certain states, or a lot of states really, that I can't. Like, for example, Texas. I can't just go to Texas and get a job. If an American or an Australian or whoever, if anyone is registered in California, as an example, and if they wanted to go work in Texas, they have to sit the exam again and then get registered again in that state. It's ridiculous. Or, I can't remember if they have to sit the exam again or whether they just have to get registered again. I have a feeling they have to sit the exam again, which is like it's baffling to me. I don't understand it at all, because you have that knowledge base, right? I understand me having to sit the exam though, because America is very different to Australia. We don't have a lot of things that you have, like we don't have rabies, for example. So I'm having to learn all about that and how I would treat that. You have a lot of diseases actually that Australia doesn't have, because Australia is the other side of the world and in the middle of nowhere. We're so surrounded by ocean that we have very strong biosecurity on purpose, especially because our animals are so precious. Like, we can't get them anywhere else. If they were to die, they're gone. So I am in the process of being able to practice here, and I do want to practice here eventually. But once I do get to the point of being able to practice, I don't think I will be working full-time again. Mostly because it's just such a demanding job, and I think I've realized that I want to be my own boss and I want creativity. I mean, the veterinary industry, vets have 6 times the national suicide rate, and about 50% of vet, well, not about, 50% of vets will no longer be a vet after 5 years of graduating. And it's for lots of different reasons. It's the fact that you're dealing with death all the time. It's the fact that people scream at you all the time. The fact that you're dealing with sick patients that you lose, or you might not know the answer, or you might make a mistake and you don't get a diagnosis right, and then you feel horrendous. It could be night shift. It could be the pay. Like, there are so many factors. Like, vets are so precious because they really aren't taken care of. We do the same amount of study as a doctor. For a human to become a human doctor, we do the same number of years. A lot of people go, well, you know, vets learn so much anatomy, and so therefore they're so much, better than doctors. And I actually don't agree with that sentiment. I think that when you look at human medicine, you have to really specialize in the field. And when you go into your specialty, you learn so much and such high detail about that area. In the veterinary world, you don't get dogs having heart transplants. You don't get dogs being saved from heart attacks. People don't have the money to spend on their pets the way that the human system tries to save human lives, because it's just not financially feasible for people, for most people. And so in the veterinary world, we tend to have a much more general idea of health, and then we don't learn such unique specificity about certain areas, because it's just not an area that we're ever going to touch, if that makes sense. Also, it gets interesting ethically, because if, for example, you look at, let's talk about organ donation. The reason why organ donation doesn't happen in animals is because you can ask a human to consent to a surgery for organ donation, but you cannot ask an animal to consent to donation, to giving up a kidney, for example, so another dog can live. So ethically, we don't do it because it's impossible for us to know that that animal is okay with now being in a situation where if something happens to that one kidney, that they're going to be okay with living like that because that went on to save another life. You know what I mean? Like, ethically, it's really questionable. I think there's like 1 or 2 countries maybe that do things like that, but it's very dicey in our community, and so most places just don't do it. Yeah, I think that's most of the questions that I have been asked lately. I'm sure you guys will ask more attached to this video, so write in the comments if you get more questions for me, and I'll do my best to answer them in a part 2 down the track. But thank you so much for listening. Bye guys.